And good morning. Welcome to Hot Seat. Hey, shout out to the dads this weekend and to the moms that put up with them. And one of the dads at the University of Oklahoma who runs is the chair of the economics department is Dr. Greg Burge. Good to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, Scott. Thank you so much.
Good to be here. I've got a friend, by the way, Boomer.
Sooner.
So a friend of mine, Jerry Isbell, who does all that great work at Limbs for Life, is always saying, Mitchell, you got to work more economics into the politics, right?
More economics.
So this is for you, Jerry. We're going to get this done. Now, I'm glad we're doing this after the debt ceiling debate, because sometimes when political reporters talk about economics and economic reporters talk about politics, it can be an ugly baby.
Yeah.
Okay. And so one of the things that's happened now is on the other side of this, I may want to ask you to give a grade for Congress through economic IQ, but I won't put you on I don't think that many of them would pass your class. But let's start with the debt ceiling fight. What came out of that we really don't understand that we should?
That's a great question. I mean, one of the things I think that came out of it is just how problematic uncertainty over things like the debt ceiling can be for the real economy. So when you think about something like this spring, we've had a great spring. The economy's going like gangbusters. Business is good. Sales are good. People are in jobs. Wages are rising. But the entire month leading up to that debt ceiling resolution it was just uncertain, right?
Sketchy,
I mean, it was sketchy.
Right?
It was sketchy, and you had, I mean, whether you look at the stock market or whether you look at other indicators like consumer spending, they really took a pause for about a month, and May was rough. And then as soon as there's resolution, as soon as calmer heads prevail and the Biden administration and Speaker McCarthy come together and they come up with bipartisan legislation that really kind of solves the problem and moves us forward, then markets just take right back off. So I think the thing people sometimes miss is that in a way the system is broken. I mean, we have, this problem come up every couple of years. And in some ways it's getting worse and worse because partisan politics is getting worse and worse. So what both parties try to accomplish through these negotiations just gets more and more embittered. Because sometimes it seems like that's the only time you can really advance your agenda. And that should be the opposite way around. What I feel like it should really be just that it's a default, that you pay your bills, you move, you advance forward. And you should have to vote, to not do that, right? So I've heard proposals to actually flip it all around and just have simple extensions of the debt ceiling that are just all about economics and just paying the bills and meeting your obligations, just be the automatic default. And then if Congress wants to get together and do something different, fine, but that should be where the legislation is required.
Concern you at all that there are so many people in Congress that would go right off the cliff?
It does. It does. I think there's probably not a good understanding from that crowd of what would actually happen, just our position globally, our leading role with currency markets. And that does bother me a little bit. I mean, I understand why they do it because they're speaking to their bases, but it's a good political move, but it's not a good economic move.
Okay, if you look at a bunch of the media this week, inflation is over. Now, that's nonsense because the Fed hit the pause button. That's all. Core inflation's still high. Mm-hmm. But we see that sort of reporting, right? People think that everything's fine. It's not. But give us an idea about where you think we're at now in inflation and what could be around the corner. Right.
Well, I mean, we're definitely making progress, right? So, I mean, if we were sitting here a year ago, we would have been talking about just some of the first initial reductions off record high inflation, right, literally in 40 years. So we've been making a lot of progress. But yeah, the narrative that inflation is over, that's just a bunch of garbage. We still have serious issues with inflation. The Fed raised rates 10 times in a row in an unprecedentedly rapid manner. And, just this recent decision to pause, it's very interesting, but they're still, forecasting 2 more rate hikes, in the next few months. And the Fed funds rate is going to be sitting over 5% for quite some time. They wouldn't do that unless, they have a real understanding that inflation is still an issue, and it is still an issue. It's still about double what they want to see, and in some sectors of the economy, just simple things like childcare, cost of putting food on the table, travel. These sorts of things are still at 6 to 8, even 10% rate of inflation, which is just too high. Now, the saving grace is energy costs have come down a little bit, right? Cheaper gas, so when you fill up at the pump, you don't feel the pain quite as much, and that's a good thing. So making progress, keeping at it. But the Fed is definitely going to sit at those high rates, and then that's going to have big impacts on the economy.
Okay, I just mentioned Jerry, who's a real estate investor. Okay, and so people are wanting to know: is this economy strong? Are we going to see a recession? I mean, give us an idea about how confident we can be in the economy.
Yeah, I mean, the economy is mixed. There are strong points. When you look at traditional measures, you look at things like unemployment rates, you see that they're low. Like when I think of a strong economy, I think of, families, right? Typical middle class family, can they get a job? Are their wages looking good? If they're getting increases in wages, is that all being eaten up by inflation or not? Like what's the real core of how they're doing? And right now, the economy is doing okay. I wouldn't say it's super strong, but it's good that people can get jobs, right? It's good that unemployment rates are low.
What about real estate?
Real estate is mixed. I feel like house prices are stable, but they're not strong. I feel like we might be on the precipice of something that's a little bit problematic. Last 10, 12 months has just been kind of wait and see. Feels like people are trying to sort of feel it out. Should I buy? Should I not buy? They still need houses. They still have purchasing power, right? Because, you still have good balance sheets. Household balance sheets look good. Debt's not too problematic. And so they want to buy, but they're being faced with these high interest rates, right? And so they're seeing the monthly payments, that are a little bit of a sticker shock. And so, if that persists long enough, then you sort of start seeing prices fall. Now, it's even worse in commercial real estate, right? So if I think about, real estate investment, you really have already had a rocky year with office space and some of these sorts of things, retail. Prices, all the leading indicators say prices have already dropped about 20% in the past year. That might even get worse before it gets better.
Can I ask you about the banking system?
Yeah, sure.
And we've seen some of the largest bank failures in history this year. So people are, the media goes on new shiny thing, everything's fine, but is it?
I don't think it's fine, but I also don't think it's kind of the crisis that we had back in sort of 2007, mass, bankruptcy. The big thing is a few of the big banks, including Silicon Valley Bank, made bad bets. They didn't believe the Fed, and back in sort of late parts of 2022, they thought that rates would stay low, and they put themselves in some really deep positions with long bonds, and that ended up just hammering them.
And where were the regulators at?
Maybe, I don't want to say asleep at the wheel, but maybe asleep at the wheel. I don't want to get too deep into the woods, but there's sort of this practice called mark to market. And so it basically allows banks to act as if they're going to hold assets and then get all the returns on that asset, even if it's 10 years down the line, 20 years down the line. Right. And it sort of just jumps over what that asset is worth right now. So banks that actually were going into the red and we're going to get hammered, we're sort of fudging the numbers a little bit, making it look like everything would be fine as long as they could make those long-run plays. And yeah, the regulators should be on top of that.
And banks too big to fail that we said we'd never do that again, and they got bigger.
They did, but you're right, and it's kind of like deja vu all over again.
Right.
I guess the one saving grace this time is the banks that were in the most trouble are sort of some of the mid-sized, smaller regional banks. Most of the blue chip sort of big dog banks I think are pretty solvent right now, and that's I think a good foundation for the banking industry moving forward.
Can we talk a little future right now?
Sure.
Two letters, AI.
AI. That's all everybody wants to talk about, right? Yeah. Well, artificial intelligence has been around for a while, but not in the way that we're seeing, now, which is it's becoming a very usable tool, right? Real people like me and you can use it, right? We can, chat GPT and we just ask it what we want to know, and it's getting pretty good. And it's becoming a way that workers, especially white-collar workers, find information, process information, disseminate that information. And it's really kind of revolutionizing entire sectors of the labor market. And, as I think about it, it's likely to be one of the biggest impacts on the way we work and the way we live since, literally the internet and, sort of just revolutionizing telecommunications.
And putting people out of jobs.
Right? People talk a lot of times about losing jobs to other countries, but honestly, we've lost a lot more jobs to, machines, and that's going to continue with AI. I think that's the trend.
Could we just go right into the digital divide, AI and the digital divide on the workforce? Oklahoma is working on workplace development. We've just done a deal. The state chamber has been working with the governor on some of this.
Yeah.
But digital divide is real. Mike Sanders over at Broadband trying to work on that, but
yeah.
What about it?
The digital divide is real. You're absolutely right. People have been talking about this for a while, but kind of the old version of the digital divide was, were kids getting educated with computers? Were they learning how to use these tools? Now it's in the workplace. And it's creating extreme inequality. So if you can do work from home and you can use Chat GPT to enhance your productivity, you probably are going to see some wage growth. Businesses are going to be loving this. It's really kind of an enhancement. But at the same time, there's entire sectors of the economy where they're going to get left behind. Either they don't have access, or if they have access, they don't have the training, right? So it's going to be about job training. It's going to be about, equipping yourself to utilize AI, essentially. And the businesses that do that well, I think are going to take off, and they're going to dominate, and the businesses that kind of lag behind, I think are going to get throttled. And I think one of the big pieces here is really work from home, because when I think about like the last 3-4 years, it's been the biggest change I've seen in my lifetime, at least, in how people envision work, right? I mean, the idea of taking a 9-to-5 job and being in somebody else's office for 40, 50 hours a week, to the youth right now, I teach at OU, interact with all of these, bright, talented, young scholars, and they think that's old school. So they're pursuing lifestyles, they're pursuing careers that offer flexibility. So when they think about things like AI and they think about things like work from home, they think, how can I absorb this into the kind of lifestyle that I want to have? And I really see the back and forth of the labor market, as it absorbs this new generation into jobs, as there's going to be some give and take. They're going to kind of have to feel out, what does the labor force look like 10 years from now?
Last one I ask you about, and this doesn't get talked about a lot, but energy and renewables impacting economics. I learned from Mike Ming, who also teaches at the University of Oklahoma, about energy poverty and how this all works globally. But energy and renewables are, in some places, controversial, but it's a big change coming to this economy.
It is a big change, and even though it is controversial, in some ways it shouldn't be. It should just be about giving people what they need, which is relatively inexpensive energy consistently in a sustainable way, right? And so absolutely, renewables are the future, and I think it's heartening to see that Oklahoma is turning attention towards that, and companies are making those investments, putting those dollars in, trying to build out their capabilities there. I'm particularly interested in the market for vehicles, right, and electric vehicles. We see places like Asia and Europe really in a lot of ways outpacing the U.S. in terms of their adoption and just bringing charging stations to people. So I think it's a very real possibility that a lot of Oklahomans may have made their last purchase of a traditional, sort of gas-only vehicle. And I think it could be an interesting, market to follow over the next 5 to 10 years.
You just said most Oklahomans may have already made their last purchase of a
new traditional gas vehicle. I think there's still going to be a very active used car market, obviously. Cars survive, 10, 15, 20 years. But I think we're less than a decade away from most of the new vehicle sales being in EVs. That'd be my prediction.
The things that are happening over there, Secretary McQueen, before him, Secretary Wagner at Energy here in Oklahoma, it's like George Jetson all over. Dr. Burge, good to have you.
It's good to be here. Really enjoyed it.
Happy Father's Day. Hope to see you again soon. It's
thank you so much.
Amazing time. And if you're not understanding the economics going into the politics, you don't get the big picture. So thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching Hot Seat. See this again, the entire full interview at news9.com/Your Vote Counts, and follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook at Mitchell Talks.